Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here. A few months ago, I did a video talking about some things that I would like to see the Marvel Cinematic Universe do with the X-Men if and when they acquired the Marvel properties currently held by Fox. At the time I made that video, this acquisition seemed like a done deal, but it's now a few months later and the only real update we've heard is that Comcast now seems interested in buying these properties, which would officially plunge my heart into eternal torment. But for the purposes of this video, let's pretend that Disney does acquire the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. I've already talked a little bit about what I would like to see the MCU do with the X-Men, so let's talk about 5 things that I would like to see the MCU do with the Fantastic Four. An honorable mention is that Reed Richards bought the old Stark Tower that Tony was selling in Spider-Man Homecoming. This idea was floated by Robert Meyer Burnett in the Collider Heroes podcast, and I will be very crushed if the Fox-Disney deal does not go through, just because this seems like the perfect way to introduce the Fantastic Four into this growing universe that we are seeing. Number 1, I'd love to skip the origins completely, much like how we did not need to see Spider-Man's origins for a third time when he was integrated into the MCU. While people might question why we haven't seen the Fantastic Four active if they have had their superpowers for a little while, I think you could get away with this by playing them more as superpowered explorers as opposed to superheroes who seek out criminal activity to stop. In some of the best Fantastic Four stories I've read, they're presented more as explorers instead of straight up superheroes, so if they went in this direction, that would be very okay with me. Number 2, no Doctor Doom or Galactus in the first movie. Every Fantastic Four movie has featured Doctor Doom in some way, and let's be honest, none of them used him very well. I get it, he's the best villain the Fantastic Four have, but let's save him for later. When Chris Nolan and Christian Bale and friends were getting ready to reboot Batman 8 years after the previous Batman film, I'm sure everyone was expecting them to open the gates with the Joker, and boy, I am glad that they did not do that. They started with relatively unknown villains, at least to the layman who doesn't read comic books, and it allowed for them to focus on the story and the main characters, and more importantly, getting both right after what was seen as a failure in Batman and Robin. If they started their reboot with the Joker, I suspect everyone would have been paying more attention to that and waiting to see them fail than they would have the aspects they really needed to focus on with their first movie in a new series. They really need to do the same thing with the Fantastic Four. Save the big guns like Galactus and Doctor Doom until the audiences who associate the Fantastic Four with suckitude can get used to the Fantastic Four being cool and interesting. Let's get this world and the protagonists right, and then you can blow our minds with a good version of Doctor Doom and Galactus, preferably in different movies though. Number 3, having said that, which villain should they open with? When you get right down to it, the Fantastic Four does not have that many good villains. Some of them are downright silly, like the Mole Man, the Red Ghost, or Diablo. Some are fine villains, but they might not make for a good movie, like the Puppet Master. Although that could work if they had him using his abilities to control people as part of some kind of larger scheme where he's trying to take control of the government. But even then, that sounds more like an Avengers plot point than a Fantastic Four plot point. The only Fantastic Four villains I could think of that could hold a movie on their own would be Super Skrull or Annihilus. Super Skrull would actually make the most sense since they are introducing the Skrulls in the upcoming Captain Marvel movie. They could have Carol do something in the early 90s that attracts the attention of the Skrulls to Earth, and then by the time we get to the present day, or whenever the Fantastic Four movie will be set, the Skrulls have sent an agent to investigate. This would be tricky since you would have to explain why it took the Skrulls almost 30 years to get to Earth after meeting Carol Danvers, or even if they don't meet Carol, at least taking that long to react to whatever event it is that attracts their attention 30 years earlier. Also, you would have to explain why the Super Skrull is able to imitate the powers of the Fantastic Four. I confess I don't know that much about the Super Skrull. Can he imitate the abilities of, say, the X-Men? If it's just the Fantastic Four, we would need a reason why. And I can't think of a good explanation off the top of my head, but that's something that the writer can think of when they're paid to do the script. These obstacles are not insurmountable, and I think if you could get around them, you could have a pretty cool movie on your hands. A sort of espionage movie just with aliens instead of human spies. And if you decided to use Annihilus, if it was me, I would say that the Negative Zone was somehow tied to the team getting their powers, although handled much better than it was in the Fantastic Four movie that we got a few years ago. Remember, no origin in this movie, but that doesn't mean that Reed can't be investigating the aftermath of the origin. And maybe Reed is finally able to get into the Negative Zone, and Annihilus is able to enter the rift that Reed created and cause all kinds of problems on Earth. The budget on that one might be a little trickier than Super Skrull, who you can always have shapeshifted as a human. But with a Fantastic Four movie handled by the MCU, I don't think that budget would be a problem. Number 4, keep the team and story in the present day. If I had $1 for every time someone revealed their hot take on how to do the Fantastic Four in the MCU, and it amounts to placing the team and the movie in the 1960s, I would have $100,000. This idea means that the team either gets their powers in the height of the space race and then somehow travels to the present day, or they remain in the 1960s and they can't interact with the MCU. I don't want them to do this for a couple of reasons. One, it wouldn't make much sense given the backstory of the MCU. We were told there were other superheroes before Iron Man, but the way I read those references was that those superheroes appeared sporadically from World War II to Iron Man outing himself and their adventures adventures were mostly covert. Given the physical appearance of 2 of the 4 team members, playing them as a covert squad would be very difficult to pull off, and even if they did somehow manage that, that's not what the Fantastic Four is. The Fantastic Four are open and very public with what they do. It would be very silly and counterintuitive to place their origin in the 1960s and have them be a secret team of superheroes that nobody knew about. Not to mention, I don't want the Fantastic Four to feel corny by speaking in 1960s slang or getting comedic mileage out of them not knowing what something is from the 21st century. Admittedly, we more or less steer clear of making Captain America look like an idiot in these movies, but I don't know if I trust anyone to avoid that a second time with the Fantastic Four. In general, I think adding the out-of-time aspect to this team would be too much. The focus would be on that and not all of the other cool things about this team. And number 5, in this movie was Sue revealing that she is pregnant. This one would really depend on how long the team has had their powers and if Reed and Sue are already married. I mean, I guess you could have them have a kid out of wedlock, but I doubt that they would want to go in that direction. But if they have had their powers for even a year or two, then you could pretty easily end this movie with Sue saying that she's pregnant, which would hint at Franklin Richards showing up in later movies. Now, I'm not saying that I want to have Franklin Richards have all of his godlike powers that he has in the comics, but having a kid be here would be a very important aspect of the characters and this team, I think. A huge important factor of the Fantastic Four is that they are a family. Literally, actually a family. So putting a kid in there, that would only hammer that aspect home. The only problem I could foresee if they did that is that kids noticeably age a lot more than adults do. Look at the first few seasons of Lost, where we get rid of Walt because he's aging faster than the show is taking place. You look at what Robert Downey Jr. looks like now versus what he looked like in 2008, and there's not much of a difference. But if you put a toddler in the second Fantastic Four movie, that kid is going to look much older in the third Fantastic Four movie. Of course, most of the franchises in the MCU so far have ended with a third movie, and we don't seem to see any signs that any of them will be getting a movie number 4. So it might be moot if you did all 3 Fantastic Four movies pretty close together. But another problem might be trying to get the entire team involved in the adventure if they have an infant that they are also trying to take care of. We don't want to appear sexist by having Sue stay at home and change the diapers, but at the same time, we also don't want to bring the baby when the team invades Latveria to put a stop to Victor's scheme. There's really a no-win situation here, but I really want to see the Fantastic Four become an actual family with the addition of a baby, and I think that'd be kind of cool since we haven't seen that in any of the Fantastic Four movies that we've gotten so far. So those are my 5 things and an honorable mention that I would like to see the MCU do with the Fantastic Four if Disney acquires the rights to these characters. Let's all hope that they do, and if they did, what do you guys think they should do with the Fantastic Four? Let me know in the comments below or make your own video. In the meantime, I will see you guys later this week with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.